Cadillac will become Formula One's 11th team in 2026. But who's going to drive for them? 20 seats become 22, 2 more opportunities for new blood in the sport. Well, I've identified 11 candidates I think could fit the bill. And they're nicely split into 3 categories, right? The Indy guys, the youngsters, and the golden oldies. So let's weigh up the merits of each and give our best prediction as to who will be filling these 2 seats in 2026, featuring a bunch of creators you might know and love. My name's Tommo. Let's talk about it. The 2024 IndyCar Vice Champion P2 in the end has already been heavily linked to an Andretti F1 seat. He was named by Michael Andretti as their #1 pick. Would that be the case for a Cadillac entry with Andretti less of a front and centre partner and more of a kind of figurehead, certainly in regards to Mario anyway. He did 2 days of testing in Portimao with McLaren in 2021, so he wouldn't be starting from complete zero. He races for Andretti in IndyCar. He's an incredibly talented racing driver who absolutely deserves to be in Formula One, and had an opportunity, of course, when Helmut Marko came knocking for the AlphaTauri seat in 2023, but at the end of 22, his super license was rejected because IndyCar don't get the super license points they deserve. With 2 P10 finishes in 22 and 23 and his P2 this year in IndyCar, he's got 32 points to his name. He needs 40 to get in. There are ways of achieving super license points. You know, you can do a bunch of FP1s, 1 point for each one you do. To guarantee, along with an IndyCar campaign in 25, you might do a bit of IMSA and WEC as well, just to help get some points up. There is a clear and obvious opportunity. Colton wants it. Andretti, I'm sure, want it as well. Colton's fast, a bit crashy, sure, but he's still only 25. He's an American bum in an American seat. He used to be Lando's teammate back in the day, back in the junior days as well. I think Colton, if he can get the super license points, surely is an odds-on thing. 3 IndyCar titles in the past 4 years. Alex Palou has made arguably the most competitive championship in world motorsport look pretty easy. It would be fascinating to see how one of the greatest IndyCar drivers of all time would fare in Formula One, right? Because to be fair to Alex, you know, coming from Spain, in the junior formulas in Europe, didn't set the world alight. It was only when he went to the States that things really started to click for him. Bit of a late burner, which, fair enough, the path isn't the same for everyone, is it? His interest in getting into F1 is what triggered his move to McLaren and then his move away from McLaren. It all got very messy. It's not a secret that I did a lot of stuff to try and get into F1 in the past, and it didn't help my career in IndyCar, and that created a lot of drama around my name and my team. He was McLaren's reserve driver last season in 2023 and has done a bunch of testing mileage for them as well. No FP1s, but he's driven an F1 car. Look, the desire is absolutely there from Alex's point of view. He's done everything you can do in IndyCar. I don't think he needs to prove himself anymore over there, and he would still be only 28 years of age come 2026 if he wanted to take a Cadillac seat. If Pato was applying for a super license today, he would not get it. But when he applied back in 2023, he did. Thanks to a concession, actually. It's mad that his P3 in 2021 wasn't enough to get him a super license, but fortunately, because of COVID, there was a concession, and basically they'd look back at the last 4 years for your super license instead of 3. So they looked at his 2020 result, where he finished P4, and that got him over the line. This is the 3rd IndyCar driver we're talking about who has tested McLaren F1 machinery, and in fact, Pato O'Ward is their current reserve driver. He took over Alex's role for 2024 when Alex went back to Chip Ganassi. And Pato has made a bunch of FP1 appearances for McLaren, which is more than can be said for Palou or Herta. Look, the Mexican appetite for Formula One is not going anywhere, and with Checo on the ropes, Pato could be a great driver to kind of pick up that interest, not only the Mexican F1 fan base, but also the Latin American IndyCar fan base, and help bring them over as well. O'Ward's super popular. I'm sure Zach Brown wouldn't stand in the way if Cadillac presented an opportunity to him, because realistically, McLaren, that door's not opening anytime soon, is it, realistically, right? They let Bortoleto go because it's not opening anytime realistically. They've got Lando, they've got Oscar, they've got Ugo for the long term as well. Pato's an almost 2-time Indy 500 winner. I think he'd be a fine addition to the F1 grid. Absolutely. Now it's time for the juniors. I'm starting with young Jack Crawford. The youngest driver on this list, Jack has taken 5 podiums this season in Formula 2 and sits P5 in the standings. With 2 rounds to go in Qatar and Abu Dhabi, he's not guaranteed a P5 finish, but let's just assume for the sake of this video, he is. If he does get P5, that would leave him with 31 super license points going into next season anyway. If he does F2 in 2025 and gets another P5, then he would have enough points to get into F1 for 26. Now, Jack joined the Aston Martin Junior program earlier this year, but in all likelihood, is a door going to open there? You know, Fernando and Lance seem very set. If Yuki can't even get in with the Honda back in, then I don't see much chance for Jack. Also, Felipe Drugovich is ahead of Jack in the kind of line, right? Because Felipe has very much stepped up and become the reserve driver at Aston Martin. Look, at this point, he hasn't set the world alight, but come 2026, he'll still only be 20 years of age, which is super young. Like, he's got room to grow, room to develop. He's part of Aston Martin's program at the moment, which is only going to help his development by the time 2026 comes along. Maybe not for a full seat at Cadillac, but certainly a reserve option. I think Jack is a great one. Oh, and he is currently Andretti's Formula E reserve driver, so there is a pre-existing connection somewhat there. I just mentioned Felipe Drugovich. I'm going to mention him again. He has to surely be somewhat in the frame. 2022 F2 world champion, kind of right place, wrong time. You look at how many juniors have got their shot this year, and unfortunately for Drugovich, his success came too early. But then again, it did take him 3 years to win Formula 2, which does put a bit of an asterisk next to that title, certainly from a F1 team point of view. And he will be 25 by the time we're in 2026, which is not the youngest. Look, Felipe's clearly quick. He's got a lot of mileage in with Aston Martin, in old machinery and in practice sessions. So as rookies go to jump in, he would be more prepared than most. And I think what Cadillac need is not to take a massive gamble. He wouldn't be the same kind of gamble as Jack Crawford, for example, would he? And given Ollie Behrman's already had, 3 run-outs in F1 this year, being a reserve driver, and Felipe's got 0 to his name, again, it's just a product of almost of like bad luck more than anything else for Drugovich. I mean, even Bortoleto has stole his thunder as the first Brazilian back in F1 since Felipe Massa, if Drugovich does get the seat in 2026. It all seems to be going against Felipe at the moment, so I'd love to see him get a shot, get an opportunity, right? Because I think his talent merits an opportunity, a chance to show what he can do. Of course, we've got to talk about Franco in this. Of course, we don't know what he's doing for 2025. Will he be part of Red Bull? Maybe. And if that is the case, then of course, Cadillac would not be an opportunity for him. But if Williams can't give him a seat, and if Red Bull can't give him a seat, he'll be on the sidelines. And I think Cadillac is a huge opportunity that is just as, if not probably more compelling, more interesting than a potential Williams opportunity waiting for Albon or Sainz to fall by the wayside. Red Bull's a risky one because they've got a habit of, you know, eating you up and spitting you out. We've seen the appetite, the massive appetite from the Argentinian fan base. We've seen his raw speed. That can't be disputed. He's been close to Alex in terms of outright pace, which is very, very impressive. Yes, he is a bit crash happy, and obviously it's a small sample set. There's a lot of pressure on him. Does Cadillac need to take that kind of risk on a young driver like Franco Colapinto? The thing is, by 2026, he'll still only be 22 years of age. And I'm sure he'll get a bunch of FP1 runouts next year for Williams if he does not go to Red Bull. He won't be a rookie jumping in. This extra seat opening up at Cadillac is huge, right? And I think Franco's the kind of driver who may benefit most from this because he's come in, he's proven that he merits at least a chance to be here and to develop and grow, because the raw speed is absolutely there. And that's the hardest thing to train. Maybe this is the most realistic and most viable opportunity out there for him. And finally, the golden oldies, and we start with a 25-year-old, which as a 31-year-old is peak irony. Look, Yuki is running out of options. Will the door open at Aston Martin? It entirely depends on how much leverage Honda actually have at that team and will exert at that team, and how much he continues to impress. He's had a great weekend, just gone in Vegas. It's been a up and down season, but more up than down. I think Yuki's stock is as high as it's ever been, and the consensus is that he's the one who deserves that Red Bull opportunity more than anyone else. He will be testing the Red Bull at the end of this season. I don't think we'll get a decision from Red Bull firmly on who is going to be in that seat alongside Max until after the Abu Dhabi postseason test. It doesn't feel like Red Bull are going to give him that chance. I think Alpine would have been a great opportunity for him to go alongside Pierre Gasly, his good friend. They drove great as teammates, I think, particularly in 2022. I think they were really solid then too. But alas, it didn't happen. Come 2026, he'll still only be 25 years of age, and he'll have 5 full seasons in F1. He will be an experienced F1 driver by then, and I think we've seen a maturity exuding from Yuki. Bahrain was really bad at the start of this year, but I feel like since then he's really screwed his head on a bit more and chilled out a bit and let his natural ability shine through. Okay, so he's beaten De Vries, he's beaten Ricciardo, he's outperforming Lawson, I would say, ever so slightly at the moment. He's doing the job, and again, by the time their relationship ended at AlphaTauri, I think him and Gasly were very, very on a par. By 26, I think he'll be an even more rounded Formula One driver and a great option for Andretti when they want experience, but also still plenty of youth and plenty of longevity that can get out of him. Now, K-Mag makes a hell of a lot of sense. First and foremost, K-Mag is younger than I think he is. He'll be 33 by the time 2026 comes along. I kind of put him in the age category of Ricciardo and Bottas and Perez and those guys. But no, he's younger. And look, K-Mag's full of experience. The difficulty is he's been quite convincingly beaten most of the time by Nico Hülkenberg during their time as Haas teammates. I would say in this second half of this season, K-Mag started to kind of come back at Nico. Is that Nico wobbling? Is that K-Mag stepping up? I think it's probably a bit of both. The most compelling case for Kevin Magnussen is that he's already raced for Cadillac. He already has a relationship with them. When he had that year out in 2021, he raced the Cadillac DPI in the IMSA Sports Car Championship, won a race, got 4 podiums in his last 4 races as well that year. Even look at his dad, Jan, had a very successful career, drove a lot of Chevys in his time, which of course is also part of GM. The Magnussen name and Cadillac GM, there's a lot of history there. And also experience at a team, Haas, who are the most recent new F1 team to join the grid. Building that Haas team up, he would have been part of that experience then with Romain Grosjean and Günther Steiner. He can lean on that experience and help Cadillac build this entry, because this is, again, a ground up entry. They're not taking over a pre-existing team, they're building it from the ground up. And I think Kevin, it makes a lot of sense. Experienced, solid teammate, fast, level-headed. Remember, he out-qualified Lewis 30% of the time during their time as Mercedes teammates over the course of those 5 years. That can't be undisputed. Yes, it's been a difficult time at Sauber, but that car has only gotten worse since the ground effect era started. At the start of 2022, when they were actually decent, it was Valtteri bringing the points home pretty consistently. It looks like he's going to have a year out in 25, go with Mercedes, weigh up his options. Cadillac absolutely has to be one of them. He's shown a very clear desire to stay in this sport. So I think Bottas is going to be pining for this one, and they should be seriously considering him because he's a 10-time race winner, right? Of the options available, he's the most successful when it comes to race wins, right? And it's hard to evaluate his Sauber season, but I don't think you can say he's coming off a bad year. I think he's doing what he can, beating his teammate Zhou Guanyu convincingly week in, week out. So what more can you ask for? He took on that Sauber Audi project hoping it would deliver. It's not quite lived up to his expectations. I think if that car was better, I think he'd be staying in that seat because he'd be showing it more. And I think right now Sauber Audi are just like, you know what, sod it, let's just throw caution to the wind and try something different. But maybe Cadillac will be the project for him that Audi never ended up being. Commercially huge and a very, very good Formula One driver when he's not in a Red Bull that doesn't work with his inherent style. Checo brings massive experience, massive eyeballs. I know he's said many a time that he wants to end his Formula One career at Red Bull, and I'm sure that would be great, right? He'd love it if the form turned around and he could stay and get a few more years out of Red Bull. Happy days. It works commercially. It just doesn't work on track. The thing is though, Cadillac is a US operation. They will of course be based primarily out of the UK in that Andretti facility that's in Silverstone. But it's important because GM said on their press release, they specifically called out their 3 US locations as well as Silverstone. Fishers, Indiana, which is the home of Andretti, Charlotte, North Carolina, and Warren in Michigan. So I think Cadillac offer Checo more viability than any other team in Formula One to live in Mexico, to be based out of Mexico with his family and still maintain good connections to the team. More races than ever now are in the Americas. When it was a much more European-centric calendar, it would have been a much more difficult balance to be based out of Mexico and all that. But I think Cadillac can be that team that are fully 100% based in the USA and make it work as well, right? Because there's such a European bias when it comes to talent, and everyone who wants to work in F1, be that Ao Komatsu or Blake Break F1, right? You have to move from the States, from Japan to Europe to actually have a job in this industry. That shouldn't have to be the case forever, you know? Checo does great things in mid-teams. I think that's very fair to say. I think Cadillac is a great opportunity for him and for them as well. F1's biggest name in the States, arguably, right, because he proper lent into Drive to Survive, did all the talk shows, he's got a huge audience over there. He's an honorary American, right? I think Daniel Ricciardo, I don't know if he'd want it. If he does, and if he takes, 25 off, keeps himself fresh still somewhat, then I think Cadillac would be silly to not consider him. I do worry about his lack of technical aptitude. Daniel is a driver that is not in the weeds of the data like a Carlos Sainz or a Sebastian Vettel. He's one who drives off instincts, but he's still bringing so much experience to the table. So, you know what? I do think they'll be in safe hands with Daniel. I do think that he's not ended his career in a bad way. I know the metrics of him going to Toro Rosso to try and get back to Red Bull, and it failed ultimately, is not great, but he wasn't doing a bad job. I think he was on par with Yuki, honestly, over the course of their time as teammates. The problem ultimately is that it just wasn't enough to showcase, right, I need to be in that Red Bull seat. I'm definitely good enough. I'm going to slap Yuki up and I'm going to definitely take that seat off of Checo. The talent's still there, but would Cadillac give him the chance to show it? Maybe. So that's all 11 drivers looked at. Who's going to sit in the seats? Well, before we get to my prediction, let's listen to the thoughts and feelings of a few F1 creators you might know and you should love.
Hey Tommo, these are my predictions. Valtteri Bottas is going to lead that team forward after a year away. They're going to want experience. Alongside him, American flag flying for Colton Herta. Reserve driver, that's a really hard one. I think Correa, Juan Manuel Correa.
Hi Tomo, you got me visiting your country, so apologies for the background noise. My imaginary lineup for the Cadillac F1 entry in 2026 would be, I guess, Colton Herta, Pato Ward, and the reserve driver, a young rookie lad from the States, I guess.
The intern master plan sees us sign Kevin Magnussen as the experienced head and Colton Herta as the young driver. That'll go change my life significantly, I'm gonna ask a soul. But the reserve driver, Connor Zilic. Except Connor Zilic doesn't have a super license, so we're gonna have to choose somebody else. We are gonna go with none other than Jack Crawford.
Hey guys, Marcel here. So my prediction for the Cadillac seat in 2026. Colton Herta, definitely a hot shot on that. And also Franco Colapinto, if he doesn't get a drive next year, he will probably get a chance for 2026. And Logan Sargent is going to be the reverse driver.
Hey guys, Spanners here. I think Cadillac will go for Colton Herta because America. And also, he doesn't have a super license, but you know what they say, rules are rules until it's inconvenient to people in power. And then it will be Zhou Guanyu for that Chinese market for GM. Cheers, Tomo. What?
Alright, my predictions, maybe more hopes for Cadillac in 2026. I think Daniel Ricciardo makes a return to help build an American brand up. For a second driver, I think Franco Colapinto, if he's available. He's a young up-and-comer with heaps of fans from South America. I just think those two make a lot of sense. And then for a reserve driver, I think someone who's outside of the sport in 2026 but wants to stay in it in some way or another, like Valtteri Bottas or Kevin Magnussen.
Simply put, Herta and Perez. Herta because the Andretti group are really backing him, and if he has a good season next year in IndyCar, he'll have enough super license points. And then with Perez, I think he might be good, let's be real, financial backing, as well as have plenty of Red Bull experience to get the team up and running before he can then call it quits after 2027.
Pato Award is pretty much a certainty. The Mexican driver will be 27 in 2026. so he'll be the most experienced driver. My second choice is Zane Maloney. He's a fast rising star from Barbados with a knack for strong finishes. For reserve driver, I have Guan Yu Zhou.
Dearest Mr. Thomas, I think Cadillac are going to start with an established driver from the current grid, someone who's proven to be quick, Pierre Gasly, because let's face it, Alpine is going to screw up next year as well. Then I think a North American wildcard who's very popular, Pato O'Ward. Reserve driver, I think they're going to go for that red, white and blue representation, sharing duties with Aston Martin and Jack Crawford.
Okay, look, for me, I'm going driver number 1, Kevin Magnussen. His experience, his connections to Cadillac, I just think it works. It really does make sense. He can take a year out in 25, and maybe that gives him more of an opportunity to work directly with Cadillac and build something up and help them develop the back end. I think K-Mag to Cadillac, it just works. Alongside Magnussen, I've got 2 names, right? Firstly, Pato O'Ward, super exciting driver, has experience in McLaren machinery, still in his mid-20s by 2026, and a huge commercial pool that could fill the void that Checo will eventually leave. O'Ward's fantastic. The problem for him is that he's not American, right? And I do think Cadillac will really want an American driver in that seat. And if he can get the super license points, I do think it's more likely that they go Colton Herta. I actually rate Colton and Pato very, very similarly. If you watch them in IndyCar, tit for tat, right? I think they're very similar ability levels. Andretti haven't had the most compelling complete car package for a while now in IndyCar, certainly not compared to Chip Ganassi, and I think, you know, Pato does his fantastic job in his Arrow McLaren. Look, if Ollie Behrman can get 6 FP1 sessions in a Haas this year, then, you know, Colton can get a bunch in, maybe broker a deal with Haas or McLaren or something to try and get some FP1s in to get him the super license points, to get it over the line. It's in his hands. He's got a good amount of points, and this P2 this year in IndyCar really helped him out. But he still needs to get it done in 2025 to absolutely secure it, because the FIA have shown that they're not prepared to compromise when it comes to super license points, because they rejected him already in 2022. And then reserve driver for me, absolutely Jack Crawford, right? He's only going to be 20 by the time that 2026 comes around, but again, he's already got a bit of Aston Martin experience under his helmet, and that's not a long-term option for him. Surely Cadillac makes sense. He's American, he's young, he's exciting, he's doing well in F2 this year. Perfect. Let me know who you think should be the 2 drivers and reserve for Cadillac in 2026. My name's Tomo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.